another video. And in this video today, we'll be talking about date functions, how we can use date functions to extract information from the data or spill out the data, a date information into multiple parts. It is one thing to understand that the date that we have parts on them. Like we have the year of the date, we have the day of the date, and we have the month of the date. So we're going to use this idea, this understanding, and we're going to walk through a couple examples to see how we can really get some result or some questions answered. So we're going to go through these examples while we talk through what the date functions is all about. So the first thing I would do here is to indicate at the top of my SQL let me blow this code up so that for easy viewing. I'm going to indicate the database that I want to pull the data from, and this is the database that we have been working with, which is the Police Data Tech. And I'm going to highlight it and click on execute. And when I do that, you can see that we now have a successful query run, and the database has been indicated at the top left. So let's start with understanding what the date functions is all about. And to do this, we're going to get the first question answered using a particular date function called GETDATE. So if I want to retrieve the current date and time of our database or the time where we are right now, I can easily write a query that looks like this. I will say select, I'll call it get date. It is a function, so I'm going to open and close a parenthesis. Now this function, the good thing about this function is that it does not take an argument. So if I run this query now, highlight it and click on execute, we can see at the top here it says the current date and time is November 7th, 2023, and at this time that I am running the code, it is 11:27. So that is another good way we can use to get the current date and time. So one interesting thing to look at this result, if you can see it, is that there is a date 2023-11-07. Now there is a space and it says 11/27/53/903. All those are the dates part. So this is a date and time kind of functions that will return you the current date and time of a particular day. So again, to get the current date and time, we can use the get date. There's another way we can get the current date and time if we select this date time. It is a function. I can open and close a parenthesis. So if I run this will still give me the same exact information. But the one thing to see is that there are more milliseconds compared to the get date. So we have more milliseconds to slice the data compared to the get date. So, but the key thing is that these two functions will take you to places to understand what the current date and time can do for us. But as part of our exercise for today and for this video, we're going to be talking about day function, month function, year function, DATEPART, DATENAME, DATEADD, DATEDIFF, and EO month, which is end of the month. So without further ado, let's move on to answer some of these questions. The first one says that we should write a query to retrieve the day of the birth for all registered patients. So what I would do in this instance is to first of all write a select star to gain understanding of the table. And that table is dbo.patients table. And if I run this code, I will see that there are various information in this particular table. For example, we have a patient ID, We have an address ID, we have a first name, last name, date of birth, gender, and so on and so forth. But because we're trying to compare and extract things from a date, we are only going to display the date of birth so that we can compare what we are working on. So if I go back to my editor, so I had to create my result set in a separate window because I got a feedback that they cannot see, and I hope this is helpful for people to see it. So I can come down here now. What I would do first of all, I will just select the date of birth from the patient date. So this is the patient's date of birth, no doubt. But the question is that we should extract the day from the date of birth. So to do that, I am leaving this guy here so that I can compare with what we have. Then I will come down here. There is a function called day. And this function, I can open and close the parentheses. Another thing that you can look at for this function to see what it takes, if I hover around it, it tells me it takes it takes exactly one argument. So that means I need to supply the date of birth inside of this day to extract the day. Because every of the date has a day, month, and year, but we only want to get the day. So I can come down here inside of the day function and I will call the date of birth. I'm going to just call it, give it an alias and say AS, and I call it day of birth. And if I run this code now, I can see that it extracts these numbers called like 15 and 20. And if I look over to the date, I have 1980-05-15. So the 15 here is the day, and I was able to extract it to this side of the column. So that is how we can extract the day from a particular date. Let's look at what this one says. This is same question, but they want to return the month. So I can copy this code because it's the same thing, all registered patient. I can copy this code, not to get you bored. I can copy this code and paste it here, but this time I will take this date off and I will run the code for now. When I run the code, I can see the date that it has, that it is the year dash the month dash the day, but they want me to display the month in a separate column. So I can come down here to extract the month. I can put a comma and I call the function called month. I will open and close a parenthesis. If I hover around this parenthesis, I can see that it says it takes exactly one argument. And an argument is anything we supply inside of the open and close parentheses. So another thing is I see the argument as if you slot in your ATM card into your ATM. The ATM never does anything. It's waiting for something. You need to supply it a number. And that number is your PIN number, which happens to be an argument for the ATM to result or to answer you. That kind of idea. So to extract the month from the date of birth, I can call the date of birth of the month. Then I can come here and call it AS, and I say this is the month of birth. And if I run it, I can see that it extracted 5, which is the 5 in here, which gives us the month of birth. And you can see at the top, it says the date, the date name, the column name is month of birth. So far so good. Same thing for the next question. The next question is asking for us to get the year of birth of all registered patients. So it's the same table, so there's no need to rewrite it. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just use what we have. We can take off the month now. And if I run this code, I can see the date of birth of all registered patients. but I want to extract the year. So I can come down here, put a comma here, and I say I want to get the year. I open and close, and if I hover around it, it tells me that this year takes exactly one argument, and that argument is the date of birth. I can give it an alias name called year of birth. And if I run this query now, I can see that it extracted the year from the date. So far, so good. That looks good. All right. So we have another information here. Here it says we should extract the day of all recorded appointment. But we can use something called DATEPART to do it rather than using going straight. So it's just to show us different flavor of what we are looking at. So for example, it says retrieve the day of all recorded appointments in the system. So that means I need to go to the appointment table. So first thing first, let's go into the appointment table and understand the data. So the dot appointment. So when I do the appointment and I run it, I can see from left to right, I have something called appointment ID, patient ID, provider ID, and appointment date. And that is what they are focusing on. So appointment date. So let's focus on that appointment date and only display appointment date and leave this other columns because they might be distracting. So let's focus on the columns that we are working on. So I can come back to my query and I'm going to reformat it a different way, and I'm going to call this appointment date. And when I have the appointment date and run it, I can see that this is the date. But at this point, I want to do something to answer the question. They said all the day, but I don't want to use the day function. I want to use another date function, which is called DATEPART. This DATEPART, if I open and close the parentheses and I look at it, it tells me it requires 2 arguments. And these 2 arguments that it requires, if I look at it, the first argument, excuse me, the first argument takes the date part. Remember, I told you at the beginning of the video that we have different parts of date. We have a year, we have a month, we have a day. So inside of this, the first argument, based on the 2 arguments that it is asking for, the first argument is the date part, which in our case, we are looking for the day. So the date part, and the next argument is the actual date that we need to extract the date part from. So if I come to this date part, I can call day. I put a comma, that is the first argument. Now I need the second argument. The second argument is the appointment date. And I will call this guy as appointment underscore day. So if I run this guy now, you can see that I was able to extract the same thing that the day function does on our earlier exercise. So for example, the day here is 23, and that is what we have here on the actual appointment date. So now we have an appointment day. So basically, this guy still does the same thing, but in a different flavor. That is how it works. So let's move on. The same thing to get the year from the appointment date. So we're still working with the same table, so there's no point for us to rewrite the code. We can come down here and paste this one and take the one that we don't need, which is the appointment day. And if I run the code, I can see the date. So at this point, what I need is to get the appointment year for all the registered all the recorded appointment. So I can come down here. I will still use the date part. I'll use the date part. I open and I close, and my first argument is the year, which is my date part. My date part that I'm looking for is the year, and the date that I need is the appointment date. And when I have the appointment date, I can come down here and I say appointment underscore year. So this will give me the appointment year. So if I run this guy and check, I can see that they are aligning. So 2023 here and the same thing as 2023. So I can come down here now and look at, does it answer the requirement? And absolutely yes, it does answer the requirement. So let's move on to other questions. Looking at these questions, they want us to retrieve the string representation of the month of procedure. So right here, remember when we wrote the month, here, it gives us just a number, 5, which is May, 2, which is February, 11, which is November. So we want to see the date like this. We want to see the date to show in string. If it is 5, it should be May. If it is 1, it should be January. If it is 12, it should be December. So that is the idea that we want to work on when they say the string representation. So there's a function that we can use to return the string representation of the month of that particular procedure date. So we're about to work with procedure date. So let's go into procedure table. So I say dbo.procedure. Remember, if you have been following this series, this procedure like this will give us a problem. So we're going to put a square bracket surrounding it. So if I run it, I can take a look at it. I can see that there is something called procedure date. So that is what we're going to target. So procedure date, let's go back to the editor. And we're going to call the procedure date. And we'll run the procedure date. And the procedure date shows us the date of the procedure, when they did the procedure. So now let's go and find out the string representation of the month. So if I come down here, there is something called date name. This date name can return the string representation of our month. So, and if I hover around it, it tells us that it requires 2 arguments. The first argument is the date part that we're interested in. And the next argument, which is the second argument, becomes the date that we are interested in. So the first argument, the date part, and the part that they want us to return is the month, comma. And now the next argument that they want us to return is actually the date. So we can come down here and say the procedure date. And I'm going to call it AS month. I'll put underscore string. And if I run this code now, I can see that we have the string representation of the date. So we can see that we have 09 as in September, 10 as in October. Let's see if we have other things to show. We have 11 as in November. So we are able to extract the string representation of this particular date. So moving on, let's see. Now, we come down here, we have another question that says we should return the string representation of the day. The day. So let's see. We come down here, we say of the procedure date. So let's take this guy and come down here and paste it. We will take what we don't need because it is the same table. We'll take what we don't need, and if we run this code, we will see that we can display the procedure date. But now let's go. We said earlier that this date name can return the string representation of a date part. Let's see if that is actually accurate. So if I come down here and I call the date name, I open and close the parentheses. The date part, which is the first argument, because this takes two arguments. The date part, which they are looking for, is the day. So I come this, I say day. Put a comma. And now the next argument is the actual date that we want to check the date part from, and that is the procedure date. And if I run this guy, after putting my alias, I can call this guy day underscore string. If I run this code, oh, look at it, it didn't work. Something is not right. So what do we do? All right. Because if we call day, right? If the 23rd of September is a Monday, we want to see it here. That is what we're looking for. So for some reason, the code did not work. But the secret is that rather than we put in day here, we can put something called weekday. Remember, weekday. Weekday. Let's go. So come down here and put weekday. So this weekday will help us to extract the day of the particular day in string. So if I run this guy now, I can see now that it goes. So if you go and confirm, you will find out that the 23rd of September 2023 is actually a Saturday. We can come down to say the 1st of November is actually a Wednesday. Is that true? Let's verify. Let me just check. 1st of November is actually a Wednesday. So the code is actually making sense and the code is adding up, right? So that is the good part of what our date functions can do for us. So let's move on with another thing. Now, we want to see how to add. Now we want to add things to a date. Either we'll add or we'll remove, but there's a function that we can use to do that. For example, they want us to add 2 months to the procedure date. And for this, there is a function called DATEADD. That DATEADD will help us add any number of dates or any number of parts to the actual date. If we want to add if we want to add month, our date part will be month. If we want to add if we want to add year, our date part will be year. We'll see how it works. So we are working with procedure. So let's borrow the procedure date and let's take the one that we don't need. And if we run this guy, we can see that we have, no, I don't need to, every time I click this thing. So what we need is this. So we have the date. Now this date that we have, our interest at the end of the day is to add 2 months to the actual date. So for example, if I go back here, so the month here is September 09. So we want to add 2 months into this and so on and so forth. So let's see how it works. So I'm going to come down here. There is something, or there's a function called DATEADD. If I open and close the parentheses and hover around it, it tells me it requires 3 arguments. And this 3 argument that it requires, it tells us that if we look at it, the first argument is the date part. The second argument is the number that I want to add. It's always a whole number. If you put a positive number, it means you're adding it. If you put a negative number, it means you're subtracting it. So that is how it works. So for that, we can come down here, send our first date part. Our first date part is the month. So we can call the month, which is our first argument. Make a comma. It says the second argument is the number that I want to supply. If it is a positive number, I am adding. If it is a negative number, I am subtracting. So I can put, they say add 2, I can put 2, comma. And the next thing is that the date, the last argument is the date that I am trying to add to. The actual date, which in our case is the procedure date. And I can call this guy, I call it month added. So if I run this code now, I can pay attention to it. So here we have a 9 as the month, and here we have 11 as the month. So we have successfully added 2 months to the date. But remember, one thing to clarify is that everything we did here is manipulating the data on the fly. It is not being affected by the data inside of the database. So that is one thing for us to pay attention to. We are manipulating the data on the fly. It is not affecting the original data. So here we have 12. Let's see if we can see something that takes us across to the year. And look at this guy. We have November 1st, and we added 2 months. It takes us to January 1st, which means it's working. So let's see another way if we are to remove a date. If we had to remove a date from this date, because here we put a positive number. So positive number, like I said earlier, will give us added information. A negative number will give us subtracting from a particular number. So if we come down here, still the procedure date, I will copy this guy. I don't want to rewrite it or get you bored. You already know how to write the code. So I can copy this guy and take it. But what I will first do to keep this structured, I can check for this guy and I see the date. But now what we want to check is to add 7 days, sorry, to remove 7 days from each of the dates. So remove 7 days. This day is 23. So we want to remove 7 and so on and so forth. So to do that, if I come down here, I can come down to my date and I say DATEADD. DATEADD. I will open and close the parentheses. Remember that my first argument is always my date part. And they want me to add days, 7 days into the date. So I can come here in this and I say day, comma. My next argument is the number that I want to add or remove. And remember, if I put a positive number, I am adding. If I put a negative number, I am subtracting. So they want me to remove 7 days. So I put a -7, comma, and next the date that I am looking for, which is the procedure date. And with that, I can call this guy as day underscore removed. And if I run this guy, I can see that it removes 7 days, which gives us the 16. It removes 7 days, which gives us the 7. It removes 7 days, which gives us 18. It removes 7 days, which gives us 19. So the function is working, is giving us some kind of useful information that we can use and work with. So now let's do the last exercise before I throw in another flavor that is not part of a question. They want us to find the age, to show the age of all the registered patients as of today. Remember, we wrote a current date that says today is, let me see, today is 11/07/2023. So we want to add all registered patients, what age they are as of today. So I can come down here. I need the patient table, so I can write select star from DBO from DBO dot the patient table. And if I go into that patient table, I can see that we have a date of birth. And that is what my goal is. So I'm going to only display the date of birth. Let's say date of birth. And if I'm only displaying the date of birth, and I can see the column looks like this. But now what I want to do, I want to find the age as of today. How old is this person compared to this? How old is this person based on today's date? So I can come down here. There is something called DATEDIFF that will find the difference between two dates. So the DATEDIFF will find the difference between two dates. So I can come down here and say DATEDIFF, and I open and close the parentheses. And if I hover around it, it tells me it requires 3 arguments. The first argument, as usual, is the date part. Then the second argument is the latest date minus the current. So the next argument is the latest date. Then the third argument is the prior date. So if I come down here, I call day because we're trying to check. No, years, not, I take that back. I'm not looking for days. If we're looking for counting people's year, day, age, we count the year, we don't count the days. Because it would be weird to say somebody is 850 something days old. So I can come down here for my year. I call my get date. I say get date because the get date will return the current date. Then I put the next argument is my patient, my date of birth for the patient. So date, so I'm going to get the date of birth. And then at this point, if I run this code, I can see, but now a lot of time it's a struggle to know which one comes first and which one is not. So I will come down here, I swap it. So this guy, even me too, I make mistake all the time. So it's not anything bad. So I can come down here and I say the date, the first date, then the third argument is the next date. So I can come down here and give this guy an alias called age. And if I run this query, I can see that we can double check. May 25th, sorry, May 15th to today, they said it's 43 years old, and so on and so forth. And if you look at it, you can put it together, you will find out that the query is making sense. And so that is how we can work with date. And with that, we come to the end of this video. But for a quick note, if I want to select something out, like filter the record based on people who were born in a certain age and time, I can easily do that. For example, if I run this query like this, I see this and I want to filter the record based on people who were born in this date. I can come down here. Let me copy this guy. I can come down here and put this query here. And now I will do where the date of birth equals, I can just grab this guy. Sorry, I can grab this guy. I say I'm looking for where the date of birth is, like May, for example. I was just looking for where the patient name is May, so I can see the information that corresponds to that. So I only filter where the date of birth is all 5. So that is how we can split records, and this will come to we've come to the end of the video. Please stay tuned. Please like the video, subscribe. Um, the next video will be a string function, and I encourage you to stick around because there are some interesting things in the string function. So I'm going to be posting this video. So I'm going to be posting this script in the GitHub. Please pull the record. Feel free to take it, and please leave me comment on the comment section below. Anything that is not clear, please ask, and I will try to clarify it. There are more videos coming, more lectures, more knowledge that we will all learn together. So please stay tuned, and we've come to the end of the video. Thank you, and God bless.